Hello everyone, this is part 17 of What If Naruto Formed a New Team, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. What is this, Orochimaru? Hiruzen's voice was low as his former pupil abandoned his disguise as the Kazekage. He held a kunai warningly to the Sandaim's tea. How dare you return to this village after all that you have done? The snake Sennin smirked widely, staring blankly ahead. Oh, I think you know very well what all of this is, Hiruzen-sensei. Nearby, other sound nin were approaching the rooftop of the stands. It's time for you and this miserable village to rest, but you don't need me to tell you that, do you? Hiruzen broke away from Orochimaru's hold, turning to face him, finally seeing through the lie of the Chunin exam. It had only been a cover so that the snake Sennin's plans could be set in motion and with no warning to Konoha either. Indeed, he is as cunning as ever. Hiruzen cast aside his robe, staring at his former pupil. I could have ended this long ago and now I have no choice. The pale-faced shinobi observed his former teacher in amusement. He looked far less formidable than he remembered, resembling a short, stick-like creature in his black attire. He was certainly no longer a ninja in his prime years of life. This is the end for you, Orochimaru warned while 4 Oto nin took their places at each of the 4 corners of the roof. You knew that if I did not espy your hand that you would espy mine. Hiruzen closed his eyes, troubled by the memory of when he discovered that his most gifted pupil was experimenting with people all for the sake of creating new jutsu. He could not bring himself to K him that day, even when given the opportunity. 4 Flames Formation. The 4 sound ninja who had arrived used a powerful barrier jutsu that encompassed the entire building surrounding Orochimaru and the Hokage. Anbu guards scrambled up the stands from the battle below, able to sense that the Sandaime was in peril. Hiruzen attacked first, forming familiar hand seals, Kaiten, Kuryu Enden. The third spat out a vicious flamethrower that raked across the rooftop, incinerating tiles in its wake, and sped directly toward the snake Sennin. Orochimaru had foreseen the attack and dodged with ease, greatly entertained by the Sandaime's hot bee assault. Orochimaru's laughter filled the air as he avoided Hiruzen's volley of attacks with little effort. Outside the wall of the barrier, Black Ops teams had descended frantically, fully aware of what the snake Sennin's intentions were. Wait, the Anbu captain halted a few paces from the barrier, as did most of his subordinates. One of his more eager warriors darted ahead without stopping and met the wall, at it with his sword. He was in flames the next moment and soon after. A grim expression was hidden behind the captain's mask. This wall is impenetrable. We'll have to hold back until it comes down. His team agreed with him silently, but they too were still restless, desperate to help their Hokage. Orochimaru paused, calculating his next move cautiously as the Sandaime attacked him again. Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique. The hail of Shuriken Hiruzen had thrown multiplied into a storm of projectiles aimed expertly for his former student. The snake Sennin countered with a jutsu of his own, Kuchio's, Edo Tensei. A coffin rose up from the tiles in front of him, meeting the majority of the shuriken and halting them completely. The remainder of the projectiles soared past him harmlessly on either side and he proceeded with his jutsu, 2 more coffins rising up on either side of the first. Hiruzen stared ahead in horror and watched as the coffins opened. The previous Hokages of Konohagakure emerged from them and they were bewildered by their surroundings. The second turned to his older brother with a detached look of curiosity. We have been summoned here, I see. The use of my forbidden technique is responsible for this. The first turned to him, nodding. Yup, this is all your fault, Tobirama. This kind of jutsu should never have landed in the wrong hands. Just who expects to accomplish anything by relimiting us? Both the first and second Hokages turned to the last of the trio who emerged from the center coffin with an adorable look of surprise on his face. He had a mop of golden hair and bright blue eyes that belied his youth. The fourth blinked while looking to his counterparts nearby, very confused, but managed a very bamboozled, well hello, gentlemen. They nodded to him in acknowledgement and the first spoke again, ah. So this is the 4th Hokage. I am so glad the village has endured for so long. Hashirama, surely you expected the Leaf Village to prosper for this long. Tobirama grumbled, embarrassed by his older brother's bubbly personality. They were still unaware of the presence of the snake Sennin who had summoned them. He waited behind them silently. He readied 3 kunai with seals attached that would put them under his complete control. Tobirama noted the third ahead of them, Hiruzen. Much time has passed since I last saw you. You must be a grandfather by now. Are you the one responsible for this? The Sandaime was white as a sheet upon seeing his old mentor. I am not the one responsible for this, sensei. It must be undone quickly. Orochimaru moved ahead casually and stood between the first and second Hokages. He controller knives into their backs and took him over. It really is such a wondrous feeling. At long last I have the chance to wield the abilities of the past leaders of this village. He brought the third kunai down, aimed for the back of the Yondaime's en, except he suddenly wasn't there. In a surreal moment Orochimaru blundered with his strike and observed in outrage as his target, completely unaware of him, had abruptly moved with some aggravating speed to stand beside the third Hokage. Anbu watching from the outside was speechless at the sight. Deciding to establish control over the fourth later, Orochimaru turned to Hashirama and Tobirama behind him, prepared to puppet them into battle. Sarutobi-sama. The fourth always had possessed a great respect for the third. You don't look so well, what's happened? This reanimation technique is dangerous. The blonde-haired ninja looked over his shoulder and assessed the situation. I see Orochimaru is here. Hiruzen nodded to him. Yes, this is his doing. I hope you'll forgive me for letting this happen. You have nothing to ask forgiveness for, Hokage-sama. His voice lowered, but I do believe a serious fight is now unavoidable. Shouts came from outside the barrier and the Anbu turned to see Jiraiya approach them, his face red with fury. I leave this village for 1 day of research and it falls to pieces. He turned to the Anbu captain. What's going on here? It's Orochimaru, sir. He's trapped Hokage-sama inside of this barrier and it can't be breached, the captain reported. Where have you been during all of this? Trying to get back into this village, Jiraiya admitted, observing their surroundings. The fighting's getting out of hand. It was like running through a funhouse just to reach the stadium. He paused in his explanation as he saw a familiar face appear near the third Hokage and he rushed up to the wall, despite the protests from the captain. Jiraiya made sure not to touch the fiery barrier, unsure of how it worked, and stared ahead at the Yondaime who he had not seen since long before his actual death, Minato. The fourth responded to his name immediately and also moved to the wall, facing his teacher, Jiraiya-sensei. I see through his plot. It was as if nothing between them had changed and Minato explained the situation. Orochimaru intends to destroy this village through an outside invasion. He has also cornered Hokage-sama while others are distracted by battles. He has used a reanimation technique to revive myself, the Shodaime and the Nadaime. I think he is already controlling Hashirama and Tobirama, somehow. All that and you haven't even had to interrogate him, eh? He couldn't help but smirk at his old pupil. I understand. Stay put, Minato, I'll have this barrier down in 5 minutes just as soon as. No, there's no time to waste. The Yondaime's eyes narrowed, shining like sapphires. Your students will if you don't go to them. He's been using them as well. How'd you know about the squirts I'm training? Go now, please, Jiraiya-sensei. Minato wasn't ready to answer any questions. I'll handle this. Just trust me. Alright, kid. Jiraiya took one last look at his student before departing, feeling an aching weight in his sea. Get this barrier down, Captain. The Anbu heeded his order before he rushed from the battle site, wondering how to go about it without being burned alive. The fourth returned to the third. I'll take Orochimaru, Hokage-sama. The third raised an eyebrow at the golden-haired ninja. Do you intend to settle an old grudge match, Minato? Of course. Minato hurled a 3-pronged kunai and zipped past the Shodaime and Nadaime, straight up to the snake Sennin, ready to fight. Orochimaru had prepared his final kunai, itching to get the Yondaime under his control. The snake Sennin had miscalculated Minato's speed. He'd forgotten how fast the man was. The Yondaime moved like the wind, sidestepping Orochimaru's predictable jab and boldly reached for the kunai, securing it, and tossed it sidelong into the barrier where it was instantly burned up. Minato smirked at the snake. You should know better than that, Orochimaru-sama. It was enough to get the sound nins be boiling. He had always hated Jiraiya's prodigy student, long before he had even become Hokage. If I can't control him then I will break him along with the Sandaime. Mokuton, Birth of dense woodland. The Shodaime's jutsu called enormous tree branches that crashed upward from the roof, trying to ensnare Hiruzen as he dodged. The third Hokage used another jutsu after avoiding the first's attack, Kuchio's no jutsu. A large, black staff appeared and Hiruzen wielded it about expertly, speaking to it, "We have trouble, Enma." The staff sounded annoyed when it answered, "You could have settled this long ago, Hiruzen." The Sandaime attacked the Nadaime and Shodaime head-on, deflecting blows with his adamantine staff. Orochimaru resorted to using his Kusanagi sword after a short scuffle, forcing Minato to counter with one of his three-pronged kunai. With his free hand, the Yondaime made his feelings for the snake Sennin perfectly clear, Rasengan. The spiraling sphere knocked Orochimaru back across the rooftop where he s into a thick tree branch that the Shodaime had summoned, knocking the wind out of him. Doton, Doruheiki. Hiruzen created a thick wall of mud that deflected a huge wave the Nadaime had created, pulling water from thin air. The Shodaime and his younger brother attacked in unison, soon overwhelming the Sandaime as he was forced further back towards the barrier. Hokage Sama. Rather than finishing Orochimaru, Minato returned to the third Hokage, noting he had been trapped in a powerful genjutsu cast by the Shodaime. While Sarutobi floundered in the darkness, unable to avoid his foe's strikes, the Yondaime managed to keep his footing long enough to release the illusion. Both Hashirama and Tobirama backed off momentarily, avoiding a spiraling sphere of chakra that was flung at them, demolishing what was left the untouched roof tiles. Enma was surprised to see Hiruzen had an ally and was quiet while Minato spoke. "Hokage Sama, our chakra is limitless and we cannot s. This impure resurrection can't be counted unless it is reversed." He paused, smiling, "I will make sure they don't get in your way, but I must ask you to defeat Orochimaru." "I'm afraid I cannot." "Very well, Minato." Hiruzen agreed to the terms, watching as the Yondaime hurled his kunai directly for Orochimaru and disappeared soundlessly as if he were a ray of light. "You cannot K me with the Hiraishin." Orochimaru deflected the kunai, knocking it away. Minato reappeared beside the kunai as it soared past the Shodaime and Nadaime, and s at them, stunning them. "Without these, they won't be very useful to you, Orochimaru-sama." Minato reached for their en and extracted the kunai from the first and second. A few quick hand seals the B of the two freed Hokages and the blonde-haired ninja sighed in relief. It was that moment of delay that cost him. Orochimaru was already at wit's end with the unpredictable Yondaime, and made it look all too simple as he appeared behind him, skewering him with his Kusanagi to hold him in place. "You've been a nuisance ever since you became a Chunin, you air-headed fool." Orochimaru hissed, driving the blade mercilessly through his back and out through his C. "You're no different from Jiraiya. Daydreamers who can't see past the now." Minato gritted his teeth, glaring at Orochimaru from the corner of his eye. He had no hope of countering and remained silent while the snake Sennin spoke again. "The greatest achievement of your life was sealing a Biju into a filthy, worthless, little infant. You could have accomplished so much more." Orochimaru smirked gleefully. "I've been waiting so long to gut you, Minato-kun. My only regret is that the fox demon could do it before I could. It was my greatest achievement, but you'll see. My son will grow to be the shining star of Konoha." The Yondaime smiled, "And he already outshines you." Minato hurled the two kunai he had taken from the Shodaime and Nadaime with the remainder of his strength toward the barrier, forcing chakra into the blades that swirled like wind about them. Orochimaru released the forbidden summoning and dispelled the Yondaime, knowing he would never cooperate. He grimaced in disgust as the body became that of one of his deceased sound genin, Zaku, who was smiling blissfully as the fourth had been moments before. He tossed the body aside, frustrated, only then realizing that the brace of chakra-enforced kunai Minato had cast seconds earlier had sailed through the barrier and met their mark. Someone screamed in pain and confusion, alerting the snake Sennin that two of the four sound shinobi who had created the barrier had been wounded. A few moments later, it flickered and then came down fully. The Anbu took immediate action, rushing to the Hokage, forming a defensive ring around him. The startled sound shinobi also reacted, surrounding Orochimaru. The palest of the four murmured to the snake Sennin, "Orochimaru-sama, Tayuya and Jirobo are wounded. They will not be able to. They stay and fight." Orochimaru hissed angrily, not caring if his subordinates suffered from injuries. "I won't have the Black Ops getting in my way." "Eliminate the other four," Hiruzen commanded, his anger only heightened by the snake's disposal of the fourth. "I will handle Orochimaru." They obeyed, moving quickly to counter Traitor, who had already taken the fight to the nearby stands as a distraction. Orochimaru readied the sword in his hand, glaring at his old mentor, feeling somewhat euphoric from his triumph over the fourth. I have no choice, I must kill Orochimaru now or Konoha will surely be destroyed. The Sandaime lifted his staff and charged ahead to meet his former pupil. Their weapons met, clashing together, and were then knocked away from their respective owners from the impact. Enma fell through the air, landing behind Hiruzen, encouraging him to kill the snake quickly. Hiruzen created 2 shadow clones and sent them to grapple with Orochimaru, who had retrieved his sword. Without a second thought, desperate to prevent the Sennin's escape, the Sandaime formed hand seals that he knew would be sure to end the fight, Shiki Fuijin. A large, transparent form faded into view behind Hiruzen, only visible to him. As much as he dreaded to see the Shinigami, he knew that he had far less to fear than his former pupil would. Orochimaru s at the pair of shadow clones restraining him, destroying them and then turning to see the third Hokage as he collided with him frantically, seizing him by the shoulders. This is the end for you, Orochimaru. Unseen to the snake Sennin's eyes, the Shinigami reached through the Sandaime, latching onto his soul and moved ahead to take his own as well. Orochimaru, Kusanagi still in hand, brought his sword down and s the Hokage in his left flank, sneering at him, really old man, did you truly believe you could defeat me? The sound ninja were holding up well against the ANBU, that was until the captain unexpectedly appeared behind one of the injured ninja, taking advantage of his wounds, and plunged a kunai in his tea. The remaining 3 attacked in unison, knocking the captain from the stands and down into the arena below. A few of his subordinates followed, while some remained to fight. Orochimaru's confidence wavered as he sensed a terrible force jolt his spirit and begin to drag it forcibly from his body, slowly and painfully. What do you think you're doing? Minato was able to endure such a dismal jutsu. Hiruzen spoke through gritted teeth, now you shall share the same fate. The snake Sennin drove his sword deeper into the Sandaime's back, frustrated to see Enma pulling back on it with equal force, refusing to let him be injured worse. The Monkey King snarled at him, infuriated that his friend was reduced to such measures. For a long while it remained a stalemate. Hiruzen pulled with all of his might on Orochimaru's soul, barely able to extract it any further past his elbows, and the Kusanagi which was embedded deep in Hiruzen's back was frozen in place by Enma's determination. I doubt I'll be able to remove his soul entirely. The third realized he had underestimated his former student. Even so, I will not allow him to threaten Leaf. He will never use another jutsu again. Just hurry up and s already. Orochimaru cried heatedly, sensing Hiruzen's end was near. You can't K me, old man. Just give up. I can't K you, Orochimaru. It has never been within my power to do so, the Sandaime hissed, but you should not expect to be so fortunate with the remainder of this village. They will end you swiftly and justly, and you will finally see the true strength of Konohagakure. Hiruzen, wait. Enma's hands were full of bee and slipping along the blade he had been restraining. Seal. The Hokage allowed the death god to complete the jutsu, s at Orochimaru's arms with its dagger, disconnecting them from the rest of his soul. Orochimaru reeled away in agony, abruptly releasing his sword. Hiruzen fell back, his own soul offered up to the mouth of the waiting Shinigami. Enma caught his body gently, removing the blade in hopes of offering him some dignity in his death. Orochimaru-sama. The remaining sound ninja rushed to the snake Sennin's side, abandoning the fight with the Black Ops. They withdrew immediately, avoiding a storm of shuriken that followed them as they fled the stadium. The Anbu looked to their captain for orders, seeing that he was beside himself with grief. A small division of his team was sent to pursue the escaping Oto ninja while he went to the Hokage, the empty feeling in his sea telling him that the Sandaime was already s. Jiraiya only had to follow the trail of devastated forest and vegetation on his way to find his students, all the while very deep in thought. How could Minato have known that I'm training a new team? Hell, how did he know that they're in danger even? As much as he trusted his former student, s or not, he found that there was no obvious explanation of how he could have been aware of anything that was going on in the living world. Jiraiya quickly decided it was better not to question his good fortune, and he knew that the fourth would be of great help to the third in dispatching Orochimaru. He was so confident he grinned widely as he moved through the canopy. I'll bet Naruto already settled things out here. It's too quiet, and judging by the scorch marks everywhere, I'd say Gamabunta also paid a visit. Like magic, out over the horizon line, Jiraiya could see the monstrous, sandy form of Shukaku crumbling pathetically, defeated. Hold still, Shikamaru, you're worse than Kiba-kun. Sakura was tending to AC above the Nara's eye once they had arrived at the garrison. You're lucky that explosion didn't blow your head off. If you had just moved sooner you wouldn't have been hurt at all. Well, excuse me, it's not like we intended to get mixed up with those cloud ninja, so troublesome. He turned to Ino and Chuji beside him. Ino, how's your arm? She flexed it curiously, wincing in pain. Well, it's better than it was. Don't worry about me though, you and Chuji are worse off, right? I'm fine. Chuji informed her, procuring a new bag of potato chips. Shikamaru looked at the blonde girl for a long moment, not buying her story, and then closed his eyes with a sigh. After aiding the Nara, Sakura turned to Kiba, who was sitting by a provision barrel with a Kamaru perched on top of his head victoriously. Without his help, or Sakura's for that matter, Team 10 would have met a grisly end at the hands of the Kumo shinobi who had ambushed them. Sakura frowned, taking a seat beside him. Where do you think Kakashi-sensei went, Kiba-kun? I don't know, but I don't think we should worry about him right now. He can handle himself. He could tell she was exhausted, judging by her anxious expression. Are you feeling all right? She nodded absently, pulling a Kamaru into her arms and scratching behind his ears. I'll be okay. I still can't believe all of this is happening, you know. Tell me about it. He paused, sniffing the air. Whoa, Sasuke's back. Let's go find him. Sakura was used to the fact that his acute sense of smell could easily locate anyone from their team with even the barest hint of a scent. She stood up and followed him and halted in her tracks when she saw Naruto and Gaara with an unconscious Haku, trudging behind their sensei, all of them looking very beat up. It was her first instinct to run to them and make sure they were all right, but Kiba pulled her along by her arm, seeing she was distracted. Come on, he's over there with Pakken. She followed Kiba to where the Uchiha prodigy was hovering, looking a bit aghast. Naruto set Haku down, seeing he was waking up. Hey Haku. How many fingers am I holding up? He waved a peace sign in front of his friend's face and Haku blinked dizzily. More than one. Close enough. Sakura had briefly checked on Sasuke and after noting that he was perfectly fine, she had excused herself and made her way over to where Team 2 had settled down. Naruto-kun. Where were you guys? He blinked up at her. Oh, hey Sakura-chan. We kind of got caught up in the worst of the fighting, but we're fine. Isn't that right, Haku-kun? Haku nodded, still very disoriented. Sakura smiled weakly at him, then turned to the blonde boy. Are you sure he's alright? He looks horrible. No, actually he nearly got himself Naruto admitted, frowning at the dark-haired boy, but hey, it wouldn't be the first time. Jiraiya approached Temari and Kankuro where they had settled near Gaara, noting they were from Suna and still couldn't help but be suspicious of them. Will you two come with me, please? We have a lot to talk about. Gaara watched his siblings as they silently followed after the toad Sennin. He knew it wouldn't take his sensei long to see what a great help they had been to the Leaf. Naruto glanced over to the red-haired boy. Sakura-chan, I think you should talk to Gaara-kun right now. She smiled at him gratefully and walked over to the bench Gaara had perched himself on. He looked up at her for a long moment, inquisitively, as if a memory had crossed his mind. Who were those two with you who went with Gama Sennin? Sakura asked curiously, sitting down beside him. Are they Leaf Shinobi? A ghost of a smile came over his face. They're from Sand. His smirk widened when she gasped in surprise. It's all right, Sakura. They're with us. She crossed her arms, finding it difficult to believe. How can you be so sure? So many ninja attacked today. I heard they even tried to take Hinata-chan. It's because they're my brother and sister, and they helped Naruto-kun and Haku-kun during the fighting, Gaara explained and then added, and even Sasuke, I've been told. I trust Temari and Kankuro with my life. Temari and Kankuro, right? Sakura spoke the names aloud for herself, mulling it over. Yeah, Naruto and Hinata talked about them a few times. She smiled. I'm just glad you're all right, and well, glad that they helped you. Gaara fell silent, relishing the sound of her comforting voice. It hadn't taken her very long to accept his siblings, something he was grateful for. His eyes scanned over to where Jiraiya was talking to his brother and sister, and then over to where a crowd of Hyuga were gathered. Gaara unintentionally smiled to himself while seeing Hinata trying to slink away from her father in an attempt to talk to Naruto while he tried to snap Haku back to his senses. Even in the chaos of an invasion, things hadn't changed. People were desperate to cling to whatever normalcy was left over, just for the reassurance that things would be alright. I've been through hell and back and not once was I abandoned. Gaara hadn't doubted that his friends would help him. Orochimaru failed. Gaara-kun, can you maybe tell me what exactly happened? Sakura spoke at length, still pondering why he and his teammates had run off so unexpectedly. Are you sure you're alright? The red-haired boy wrapped his arms around her in silence and she let out a small squeak. She knew he was capable of showing affection, but she wondered what he must have been thinking about earlier that made him want to be close to her. He seemed overwhelmed. Sakura rested her chin on his shoulder, ignoring Naruto's mirthful chatter from nearby. If Gaara wanted to embrace, she wasn't complaining. It had looked like rain all morning. The sky was overcast and miserable. Clouds loomed over a crowd of shinobi clustered together below the Hokage monument. Genin, Chunin and Junin stood collectively, all grieving over the passing of the Sandaime. The funeral could have been a more pleasant affair had they not lost their leader during the invasion. Many had expected someone his age to rest peacefully in his sleep, but it appeared that all of the past Hokages, Hiruzen included, could not avoid the destiny that all the leaders of Konoha shared, for their village. Naruto stood between Haku and Gaara and watched stone-faced as his peers placed white flowers on the shrine dedicated to their late leader. Something inside him had changed. His understanding of what he believed the Hokage to be had deepened. I'm looking at me, I know it. This is what I want. The more he thought about it, the less far away the whole idea seemed. When I become Hokage, I'm going to one day too. Everyone but this is how it is. When I it'll be just like this, a hero's farewell. He could sense that Gaara and Haku had realized it too, finally able to accept the fact that what Naruto wanted was to be a noble leader who would ultimately in battle. Though they feared the notion, there was always the underlying fact that once that day came they would be there with him fighting by his side. That softened the entire notion considerably. The ceremony had proceeded even while thunder rolled threateningly overhead. Hiruzen's remaining family stood at the front of the crowd beside the Genin, many crying openly without signs of stopping. A fierce wind knocked a few petals from the flowers that had been left in front of the Sandaime's memorial, scattering them across the platform. After a long eulogy and a silent prayer for a safe journey to the afterlife, the attending ninja began to file away from the lookout. All expressions were dark. The Genin left the ceremony together quietly, some reorganizing back into their squads just to spend the rest of the day with each other in hopes of lightening the mood. Lee looked up as a crack of lightning illuminated the sky. He frowned disapprovingly up at the coming storm and then looked to Tenten. Shall I walk you home? She was dressed in black like her peers. It was the same dress she had worn at her parents' funeral, as a matter of fact. Tenten noted the umbrella in Lee's hand and silently commended him for thinking ahead. I'd appreciate it, Lee. She brushed her hand against Neji's arm to snap him out of his disconsolate trance. He glanced over to her, looking defeated. Tenten gave him a hopeful smile. Listen, Neji, I'll see you tomorrow. We have a lot of training to catch up on. He nodded. I look forward to it. Lee raised a furry eyebrow at Neji's response as the Hyuga prodigy joined up with the rest of his kin on their return trip to the compound. He fell in step beside Hinata and Tenten's smile widened approvingly. I believe your positive attitude is beginning to rub off on him, if it is not too bold to say. Lee observed, opening the umbrella which was a deep cobalt blue. Tenten had half expected it to be green but she shooed the thought away. I hope so, Tenten answered, joining him beneath the shelter of the umbrella as raindrops began to plop down to the concrete. He's not so bad, you know. His feelings get hurt too, he just doesn't show it. Her friend nodded in understanding, seeing her point. The walk to her apartment building was relatively short since it was nearby. She was outwardly glad that Lee was generous enough to keep her out of the pouring rain. He left her on the front steps of the complex beneath an overhang and she couldn't help but hug him. He laughed at her expression of grawd and told her to be prepared for a long day of training tomorrow. Lee scurried off down the sidewalk as the rain became increasingly worse. Tenten had nearly entered the building before a crash in a nearby alleyway attracted her attention. Curiosity getting the better of her, she darted around the corner to check and found a very drunk, very depressed Genma loitering around. She had actually met him once before at a briefing with Guy Sensei. She knew that he was once the teammate of her sensei back in the day. He hadn't been the most outgoing person she had met, but Tenten was sympathetic enough to offer to bring him home. Before setting out, she removed the senbon from his mouth for fear of him choking on it. He had protested in mumbles and broken phrases, but allowed the young Kunoichi to get him out of the rain. Iruka had volunteered to clean up after the ceremony was over and was not surprised to find Naruto and his teammates had not budged since the service had ended. I should have expected as much. They owe a great deal to the third, I doubt it will be easy for them to say goodbye. He walked over to the three boys, blinking in wonder to see rain avoiding him as it poured down. Haku's Kekkei Genkai, I forgot. Still, he wanted to get them out of the storm. Come on you three, the funeral's over. It'd be disrespectful to overstay your welcome. Iruka found his voice had softened at the sight of Naruto's crestfallen face. I mean, let Hokage-sama's spirit join the afterlife now. Let go. It's about time you all went home. Iruka-sensei, Naruto's voice was low, but somewhat optimistic. I don't think his spirit's ever really gonna leave, you know. He looked up at his former teacher, surprising him with eyes full of wisdom. He's here to stay. He was an important part of this village. Iruka agreed. Yes, that's right, Naruto. He couldn't find anything else to say. He could tell then, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this particular cell of Genin was destined for great things. It was nice seeing you again, Iruka-sensei. Haku bade him farewell and followed after Naruto and Gaara, who had nodded respectfully to their Chunin instructor. Iruka watched them fondly as they left, smiling even as the heavens rained down. 4 days later, fog descended on the outlying forest of Konoha. A guard near the entrance of a small gate to the village noted 2 dark figures trekking through the morning mist. Only the soft singing of bells a testament to their presence. The 2 cloaked men paused momentarily at the gate as the guard stopped them and politely asked for identification. He fell unconscious a second later and collapsed to the ground. The pair of strangers entered the village unchecked, ready to begin their search. An announcement. Naruto inquired his dark-haired friend as he and Haku walked to their training grounds. What has Ero-sensei got to tell us now that's so important? I'm not sure, Haku admitted. Gaara-kun should already be there, I think. Due to the fierce rainstorm days earlier, their training area was still completely doused with mud and unfit for training. They still used it for team meetings, however. As Haku had predicted, Gaara was already there waiting for them, as was Jiraiya. The grave look on their mentor's face notified them that there were serious matters that needed to be addressed. All right, squirts, I'll get straight to the point. Jiraiya took a drag on his pipe, looking clearly peeved. Since yours truly here would rather not become the next Hokage, I've been appointed to find an old friend of mine who will take up the position as the 5th. The 3 of them were stunned into silence. Had Jiraiya been notifying them that he had in fact been appointed the new Hokage, they probably would have all gone into anaphylactic shock, since combining the words, Jiraiya, and Hokage, was allergen enough. I'm here to check if any of you 3 are up to coming with me on this trip, Jiraiya continued, ignoring their confounded faces. It may take a while, so think before you volunteer. Gaara lowered his eyes in thought. Temari and Kankuro will not be returning to Suna yet because of the quarantine on foreign shinobi. I don't think now would be the wisest time for me to leave them here on their own. His sensei nodded. You stay here with your brother and sister, kid. You won't be missing much. I'm afraid I'm not up to full strength yet as well, Haku said quietly, flinching under Jiraiya's knowing gaze. The cursed seal had a heavy toll on my chakra. I'm aware, Haku, he said snappishly, still slightly angry at his pupil for using the seal twice. Don't let it happen again, understood. The dark-haired boy nodded and the toad sage blinked down at Naruto, who appeared to have no complaints or health issues. I'll go, Ero-sensei. How long do you think this will take? Maybe a few days in the least, and if we're unlucky, maybe a week or so. Jiraiya took another drag. You up to it, squirt? You bet I am. Naruto folded his arms confidently, not caring if his mentor was particularly vague on the details. Jiraiya was grateful for Naruto's new maturity level, being that he had anticipated the boy to have a fit upon finding out the next Hokage would not be him. Realistically speaking, however, Naruto was still mindful enough to know it was a burden he was not ready for and still aimed to train rigorously for the years to come. Get packing then. I'll meet you on the East Bridge. Jiraiya concluded, then glanced at his remaining students. As for you two, keep a sharp eye for trouble. With Konoha in this weakened state, another attack is a possibility. They took the news into consideration. Naruto left alongside his friends but split ways with them to return to the apartment and pack supplies. Haku and Gaara continued down the main street, wondering what to do with their stolen time. So, where are Temari and Kankuro at the moment? Haku asked cautiously, knowing Gaara was still touchy on the subject. The red-haired boy, in contrast, was already aware of Haku's positive change in attitude towards his siblings and acknowledged it. Sakura-chan volunteered to show them around the village this morning to get them better acquainted, she had said. Haku chuckled, I'm sure they're having fun then. Hinata had settled herself on a porch nearby her garden, hoping that some fresh air would make her feel better. Unfortunately, there were few things that could help her at all at the time. She had not made much of a fuss over it, and now she was wondering if that was a mistake. Hinata was deeply troubled by the persistent ache behind her eyes that plagued her for days on end. It may have been a natural occurrence, she once suspected. Yet if it wasn't, she was too fearful to confront her father with the problem if it would jeopardize her place in the family. What coward like me would endure such pain, only for fear of a worse pain? Hinata had not thought very highly of herself after the Hokage's death, even though stories of her bravery during the invasion had spread through her entire clan. Her father had been raising his chin higher in her presence, embracing a newfound pride he had long overlooked in his eldest child. From across the lawn, Neji had spotted her. His face was calm and surprisingly friendly when he approached, but she had been too high-strung to note his genial mood. Good morning, Hinata-sama, he greeted, and she was able to tell he had deliberately taken time out of his training to see her. I want to thank you for what you did for Fujita-san during the attack. Her memory came back quickly. Fujita, the young boy who had been taken prisoner by Kumo, the one she had traded for a shadow clone she had made. Hinata smiled shyly at her cousin. I really didn't think twice about it, Neji-nisan, then added, even without a Kage Bunshin, I still would have done it. It seemed he had more to say when his face was racked with something akin to guilt. I also want to apologize for anything disrespectful I may have said to you or Naruto during the exam. It was not my place. She nodded sheepishly, surprised to see him so humble. As he turned away to leave, something made her speak up again, Neji-nisan. Neji turned back to her, looking at her expectantly. May I tell you something? Hinata asked quietly, something you will not repeat. A secret. He smirked, automatically assuming it had something to do with Naruto, of course, Hinata-sama. She gulped audibly, wondering how he would react, and forced herself to speak. My eyes, Nisan, they are causing me great pain recently. Neji gave her an inquiring look. I have not been injured at all. I wonder, have you ever had such a problem? He had not been expecting such a dilemma from his younger cousin. Rather than answering right away, he activated his Byakugan and briefly scanned her eyes for any abnormalities. Hinata held very still, embarrassment quickly becoming visible on her pink cheeks. There's nothing wrong, Hinata-sama, that I can see at least, Neji announced, eyeing her clinically. The chakra coils behind your eyes are channeling more chakra than normal. You may have strained yourself during the invasion. She took his suggestion into consideration but still doubted it. Actually, I did have some pains when my Byakugan matured, he admitted, recalling it as if it had happened not too long ago. After a few days training with Tenten I was fine. Hinata frowned, adding one last piece of information, my pain has lasted several months. Neji deactivated his Byakugan and stared at her for a long moment, looking slightly concerned. Then I am not sure what that means. It shouldn't be lasting for more than a few days. Worry etched its way quickly across her features. If her problem was not the same as Neji's, it could possibly be more serious. That's something she had not wanted to hear. If I can, I'll look it up in the Hyuga archives and see if it's a doented issue, Neji offered, not wanting her to panic. If it isn't affecting your Byakugan or overall vision, you shouldn't fret so much. She nodded, taking a deep, calming breath. Actually speaking to someone had done her wonders on the matter. She was feeling better already. Hinata had still astounded herself by speaking to her cousin of all people, but it had worked nonetheless. The Hyuga prodigy was quiet for a moment and then decided, I won't tell Hiashi-sama, if that's alright with you. Thank you, Neji-nisan, she smiled again and stood, Feeling new energy, I think I should find Shino-kun now. Today Sato-kun is being discharged from the hospital and I'm sure he'd like to stretch his legs. Neji smiled before bidding her farewell. Hinata parted ways with her cousin, hoping that the delicate new friendship she had made would only grow stronger with time. The sun had risen higher in the sky and banished the faint mist from the village below. The two strangers stood side by side on a high tree branch overlooking Konoha, keeping a sharp eye for their target. "You're sure he'll be here after all the fuss Orochimaru caused?" One spoke with a deep voice, and was clearly foreign to the region. His partner answered succinctly, "He is near. Let's move." Naruto had packed quickly and before setting off to find his sensei, gave one last piece of advice to his friends: "Just make sure you guys don't burn the place down while I'm gone." He had locked the apartment door behind him and leapt over the balcony with an energetic wave, landing on the street below. Haku couldn't help but grin at his friend's comedic behavior. It was something Gaara only snorted at. They went to fetch lunch shortly after that. Naruto, on his way to the East Bridge, see across a training field where he was very glad to spot Hinata. She stood near a training post, staring at it contemplatively. "Hinata-chan." She jumped slightly at his voice but hastily turned to face him. "Oh, hello, Naruto-kun." He eyed his head inquisitively. "What are you doing out here all on your own?" "Shino-kun went to get Sato-kun from the hospital," Hinata explained softly. "I'm waiting here for them so we can train together." Naruto grinned. "Yeah, I'd bet he'd like that after sitting on his butt doing nothing for a few days." He then went on to tell her of his new mission objective that he would be partaking without Haku or Gaara. "Then I wish you luck and a safe return home." She was smiling blithely after listening to his cheery explanation and delighted in the foxy grin he gave in response. "You'll see, Hinata-chan," he waved as he walked off, grinning widely, "when I get back, there's gonna be a new Hokage in town." Sasuke lazed about near the front of the stadium, watching the slow reconstruction of nearby buildings drag along. Sakura had convinced Kiba to help her entertain the two straggler sand ninja for the day. When she had asked him if he wanted to join them, he had to decline. He felt it was a mistake to be friendly with shinobi from a village that had recently tried to demolish Konoha. Although she had insisted they had supported Leaf during the attack, he chose to keep to his own opinions. And that monster in the forest that Naruto fought against, Sasuke recalled the giant tanuki that had gone on a rampage, that was Gaara. He's a demon. All the more reason to keep a watchful eye on Sakura. She had been spending an increasing amount of time with the red-haired boy. It was a satisfying notion, in a way. He hadn't liked Gaara since the first time they had been introduced. Something about him had been off from the start. If he even comes close to transforming into that thing again, I'll be there. This time I'll be ready. The way he figured it, was that if he wasn't strong enough to defeat Gaara, he couldn't possibly be capable of throwing down his older brother. While devising new plans to counter the sand spirit inside of his new nemesis, a messenger hawk overhead caught his attention. What does Kakashi want now? Annoyed by the interruption, Sasuke stood, moving on into town to find his mentor. Kakashi waited outside a tea house for his student with his nose buried in a new copy of Ika Ika Paradise. While he read contentedly, he could sense an unfamiliar presence close by, and wondered what it meant. Right in the nick of time, Kakashi noted Kurenai and Asuma turning the corner together looking all googly-eyed. He grinned at the sight of them, finding it cute. "Or, are you two on a date today?" "What? Don't be ridiculous." Kurenai answered reflexively. "Anko asked me to get her some dango before I left." Asuma blinked at her, finding her cover story unnecessary, then turned to Kakashi. "And what about you, Kakashi? It's not like you to hang around sweet shops." "Oh, just waiting for Sasuke is all." Inside the shop, a man seated at a table had a fierce hand spasm and quickly overcame it. Kakashi as well as his companions noticed the eavesdropper's reaction to the name. As if on cue, Sasuke crossed the street and frowned at Kakashi all the while. "You sent for me, right? Why did you pick a place like this? I hate sweets." Kakashi turned to his pupil, giving him a near apologetic look. Right, Sasuke-kun. Sorry, I forgot. It's always so much easier to get Sato in here. I'm afraid we'll have to see this short though." He glanced back over his shoulder, noting the eavesdropper and his friend had disappeared from their table. "We'll chat later, if that's all right." His student was confused. "I guess. Nodding to Asuma and Kurenai, Kakashi followed after them as they abandoned the tea house, ready to pursue the suspicious newcomers. They had not gotten far. Where do you two think you're off to? Asuma inquired. He and his fellow Junin barred their path as they had taken to a road beside a canal. I don't think I've seen you around here before. Kurenai stared ahead as they slowly removed their hats, the small bells attached to them ringing softly. The two cast them aside, startling the pair of waiting leaf shinobi. The shorter of the two intruders was pale with long black hair tied in a ponytail. His eyes were narrow and the trademark onyx of his clan. His expression was stoic, but he regarded the shinobi in front of him for a moment, recognizing them. Uchiha Itachi, you've got guts coming back here after what you did. Asuma growled warningly, exhaling cigarette smoke through his nostrils. Someone as smart as you should know better than to return to this village. Asuma-san, Kurenai-san, it has been a long time. Itachi greeted them formally, his voice deep and smooth. I'm not very much interested in a conversation right now. They glared back at him, gearing up for a fight. Beside him his companion laughed at the sight of the standoff. They know you, Itachi-san. Perhaps I should introduce myself too. I know you, Hoshigaki Kisame. You're a Nukanen from Hidden Mist and a former member of the 7 Shinobi Swordsmen. Kurenai's eyes were sharp and wary. Who thought a pair like you would be able to work together? Kisame was nowhere near as good looking as his partner. He was tall and broad with pale blue fish-like skin and cruel eyes. Markings beneath his eyes resembled gills, adding to his shark-like appearance. A large zanbato was slung over his back wrapped in bandages. It's a shame we've been discovered so soon, Itachi stated dryly. It appears they'll have to be eliminated if we are to continue unnoticed. Kisame grinned, liking the idea. Why don't I start then? Anticipating an attack, Kurenai formed hand seals and used a powerful genjutsu that made her vanish. It was difficult to see the hand signs Kisame had used that formed a thick haze that blanketed the entire area, obscuring himself and Itachi from view. Asuma whipped out his trench knives, at the oncoming water clones that attacked from all directions. One of the 5 clones managed a savage hit that sent the smoking Junin flying down into the nearby waterway, knocking the cigarette from his mouth. Kisame leapt gleefully down the bank after Asuma, enjoying the fight. The lingering mist had not hindered Kurenai's genjutsu. Itachi made no move to struggle as a tree appeared behind him and ensnared him with thick roots. She loomed above him, half melded with the ghastly tree and drew a kunai to finish him. What? All in an instant, Kurenai found herself substituted in Itachi's place, trapped in her own jutsu, a genjutsu counter. The Uchiha watched her calmly as she struggled, readying a blade beneath his cloak. It was disappointing that she had not put up much of a fight. Junin of this village act too rashly, he unexpectedly, clipping her shoulder while she bit down ferociously on her tongue, freeing herself from the illusion. Kurenai stumbled away, unable to regroup as he came after her with the short sword. Kurenai! Asuma shouted. He destroyed the last of the remaining water clones and made a move for the bank. Kisame stepped in his way, beaming while his massive blade fell downward, missing his target by inches. Kaiten, Heisukisho. Asuma exhaled a cloud of superheated ash that would have undoubtedly injured Kisame had he not countered with his own jutsu, Suten, Sukoden no Jutsu. The attacks cancelled each other out and Asuma leapt up the bank, standing beside Kurenai while Itachi neared with a blank expression. Suten, Water Dragon Blast. Kisame's follow-up jutsu was aimed for the shore. Curiously enough, 2 currents of water rose from the canal and crashed into each other before they could do any harm to the shinobi on the nearby path. What took you so long, Kakashi? Asuma grunted as his friend appeared in front of him, able to counter Kisame's jutsu with the help of his Sharingan. Itachi had moved, he just barely noticed, joining Kisame out on the water. The 3-leaf ninja pursued, Kakashi at the front and was met by Itachi with a rapid volley of punches before grappling with him. Itachi's shadow clone abruptly exploded, blowing apart the water clone Kakashi had substituted himself with. Both ninja regrouped, deliberating their next course of action. Listen, Kakashi's voice was rough and nearly frantic as he spoke to his companions, close your eyes and stay away from Itachi. One look into his eyes will have you under a genjutsu in an instant. Baffled, Asuma and Kurenai obeyed and shut their eyes. After a tense moment, the Kunoichi spoke up. What's wrong, Kakashi? Can you fight him? Only his Sharingan eye remained open, but he avoided the Uchiha's gaze cautiously. The Hatake quickly examined the situation in his head. No eye contact. It'll make his actions more difficult to predict, and his partner will attack again soon. Stand down, kiss him, Itachi said shortly, halting him before he had nearly charged at the unguarded shinobi. I will end this. Kisum watched knowingly as the tomo in the Uchiha's Sharingan melded into a pinwheel shape, preparing a terrifying jutsu that even Kakashi could not counter. Kakashi kept his gaze focused on the water. Even then, sadly, the reflection of Itachi's Mangenkyo Sharingan was enough to ensnare him in a genjutsu. Tsukuyomi. Kakashi froze, his mind captured in a dark world fully fabricated by the Uchiha. Kisum looked on silently, still intent on finishing Asuma and Kurenai as they waited behind the Hatake. They were unaware of what was happening. After a few moments, Kakashi collapsed to his knees, startling his companions. Asuma opened his eyes, checking on his friend, Kakashi. What happened? Keep your eyes closed. He rasped in response, his breathing haggard. It was. What seemed only a few eventless seconds to onlookers had been 72 hours of endless tea for Kakashi with effects that had physically manifested. Itachi, it appeared, had also strained himself in using the jutsu and allowed Kisum to proceed with the disposal of the remaining shinobi. He raced forward, only to be knocked back by a ninja that had dive-bombed him from the sky. Intruders have no manners. Guy snorted, upset to see his eternal rival out of action at the hands of the pair of Nukanen. Kisum was impressed, if only for a moment. You're very strong, aren't you? Enough, Kisum. Itachi had decided fighting was then no longer necessary. We are straying from our objective. Kakashi raised his eyes to the Uchiha, realizing their intentions. I've heard of your group's plot. You're hunting the 9 Biju, you're here for Naruto. His companions were surprised when Itachi confirmed it. Yes. We have come here in search of Naruto. He is all that remains of the Yondaim's legacy. He turned to his partner. Let's leave before we start a war. Kisum agreed without question and fled alongside the Uchiha, knowing the Junin would not follow them, or rather, could not follow them. A local village had been taking down decorations from a recent festival once Jiraiya and his blonde pupil had arrived. The Toad Sage had even received a helpful tip from an innkeeper that he had seen a woman fitting the description Jiraiya had given him. Then began the frantic search to find her. Jiraiya had figured there was still a very good chance she was in the area and decided to not waste time, even with all the really cute girls floating around. So who are we looking for exactly, Ero-sensei? Naruto asked curiously, noting the resolute expression on his mentor's face. Her name is Tsunade, but you'll have better luck looking for a busty, blonde woman who has an assistant and a pig waiting on her every whim, Jiraiya announced, scratching his N. If you find her, be respectful or you could blow this whole mission. We meet back at this hotel in 20 minutes, got it squirt? Big B, blonde, something about a pig, got it? Naruto nodded, we'll find her for sure. They parted ways outside the hotel. Jiraiya turned left and his student went to the right. After a few minutes of looking, Naruto had already spotted several women fitting the description he had been given within the vicinity, all excluding the presence of the assistant and pig, yet he wondered if that was entirely crucial to finding her. Very politely he asked the ladies their names, only to be disappointed time and again. Jiraiya ended up near an open-air bar, inspecting the women nearby, keeping a sharp eye for Tsunade while picking prime figures he would consider penciling into his novels. He bought himself a drink to pass the time and couldn't help but overhear the barkeep talking to one of his customers. Yep. 2 odd fellows in black cloaks stopped by here. They didn't say who it was they were looking for, but I'd imagined it'd be something over money or. Jiraiya quickly abandoned the bar without paying his tab and took his drink with him. Excuse me, your name wouldn't happen to be Tsunade, would it? The blonde boy asked courteously. He was beginning to lose enthusiasm for his appointed task after asking nearly 3 dozen women with no success. No, I'm afraid not. The lady was quite friendly and in the middle of eating lunch. You aren't lost, are you, sweetie? I'm fine. Being lost is kinda the norm for me, Naruto replied, disheartened. Sorry for bothering you. Frustrated, he stomped hastily down the street, deciding he'd retire early and meet up with his teacher at the hotel. Yeesh, it's a madhouse around here. So many people and I'm only looking for one of them who I don't even know. Too absorbed in his thoughts, Naruto walked headlong into a tall man wearing a strange hat. He blinked up at him and apologized, "Sorry. I didn't mean to bump into you. I've been looking for someone." Quote. "It's alright, kid, as it is." His smile revealed unusually sharp teeth. "I'm also looking for someone." Naruto squinted up at the stranger. That's a coincidence. Indeed, he laughed at the boy. "I can hold off my search for now and help you, if you like. I'm Kisame." Naruto sanguinely introduced himself. "Hey, thanks a ton. Uzumaki Naruto." A cheerful bounce returned to his step as he followed Kisame, explaining his goal. "Right. So I'm looking for this lady, though I haven't met her yet." They turned the corner onto the main road and Kisame offered him the first bit of good news he'd had in a while. "It's funny you should say something like that. I saw someone like that not too long ago." "Really? Ha! I can't believe my luck." Naruto was beaming at his good fortune. "Once I find her, I'll make Ero-sensei buy me dinner." They drew curious looks from passers-by on the street, and the blonde boy had plenty of questions for Kisame, one of which commented on his peculiar facial features. After a moment Naruto wondered if he had been rude to bring it up, but was surprised when Kisame didn't seem much bothered by it. "My entire clan looks as I do, actually. We hail from the Hidden Mist village." You don't say." He was honestly intrigued. "My friend comes from a clan down there too. But he's a bit of a different story." "I should think he would be," Kisame replied, knowing everyone in his clan with the exception of himself had been killed long ago. Oddly, he found that he was mildly interested in what the boy had to say. When Itachi had described the Jinchuriki they were looking for, he hadn't pictured a friendly, conversational, overly trusting genin who wanted to make friends with the entire world. Things couldn't get much easier, so he decided to go with it and see how things played out. After a short while of searching, Naruto had insisted that they stop for some ramen, something to which Kisame did not object. In fact, he finished his bowl just as quickly as the boy did and found it bizarre how confident he was that he would one day be Hokage. "Hey, like you'll live that long, kid." They set out soon after and Naruto described the recent invasion of Konoha and how sound and sand had been thwarted. Naruto gave a questioning look to his friend when they had treaded into a deserted alleyway. "Hey, Kisame, do you think maybe we went the wrong way?" "No, Naruto. We are definitely right where we are supposed to be," Kisame assured him, smirking as Itachi appeared at the opposite end of the passage. "You were right, Itachi-san. He was easier to find than I thought." Realization flickered in Naruto's eyes and he glared ahead at the Uchiha, understanding that he had played into a trap. Itachi moved with blinding speed, landing a knockout blow to the side of the Genin Zen, and destroyed a shadow clone. He blinked slowly, muttering, "Clever." Dozens of shadow clones watched the two Nukenin from the rooftops above, all wearing angered expressions. The real Naruto spoke up, fuming, "Someone like you should have known better than to take advantage of my hospitality." Kisame assumed he was referring to when he had treated him to ramen. "I like you, kid, really. But orders are orders. Once we take you in you may get lucky and we may not have to kill you." "Sorry, but that's not enough incentive," Naruto snapped. He and his cage bunshin leaped down to fight. Asuma, Kurenai and Guy had gathered in Kakashi's room, wondering when he would wake from his coma-like state that had been induced by Itachi's genjutsu. They sat quietly, wondering how long it would be before Itachi and Kisame discovered their target. Sasuke's timing could not have been worse when he had stopped by the apartment, walking in and seeing the group of Junin waiting on his disabled teacher. He had been wondering what had been taking him so long, and was then certain that something was amiss. What happened to Kakashi? Asuma smirked silently while he took a drag. Kurenai averted her eyes from the young Uchiha, leaving it up to Guy to come up with an explanation. A moment later, a leaf ninja poked his head in the door, wanting to confirm the rumors. "Is it true that Uchiha Itachi has returned and that he's looking for Naruto?" There was a unified gasp in the room and all eyes fell on Sasuke, fearing his reaction. Asuma's amused expression soured at the newcomer's blunder. A long, gut-wrenching moment had passed before Sasuke immediately bolted from the room, dashing down the hallway with only one thing on his mind. Each of the waiting Junin in the room gave the dunderhead a well-measured scowl. "He's here. I don't know why but he's here." Sasuke quickly rearranged his priorities to accommodate the current circumstances, and he's looking for Naruto. "Why? I've got to find him. This may be my only chance." Recalling Naruto's most favored spot in the village, Sasuke checked in at Ichiraku Ramen and was disappointed to see that he was not there. He settled for information on his whereabouts instead. Where's Naruto? Ayami blinked up at him. Naruto-kun. He may be with Haku-kun and Gaara-kun. Team 2. He left. Find Haku and Gaara. Find Naruto. Find Itachi. Itachi. It was also clear, yet every second felt like forever as he ran, desperate to find some sign that would direct him to his objective and his chance to revenge his clan. Gaara and Haku, thankfully, were nearby and on their way to join Sakura and her company. Sasuke leapt in front of them, startling Haku and annoying Gaara. He kept it short because he didn't have time. Where's Naruto? He isn't with you. The red-haired boy gave him an incredulous look. What business do you have with him? Sasuke glared at him, wondering if he'd end up someone before he got his hands on Itachi. Haku was more helpful though and gave a warning look to his friend. No, Sasuke. Naruto went out of town with Jiraiya-sensei to find our replacement Hokage. Where? Gaara really wanted to punch him. What the hell did he want with Naruto? Naruto was too good to socialize with like Uchiha, at least in Gaara's opinion. At Tanzaku Quarter, Sasuke left abruptly and Haku trailed off as he spoke, finding his behavior a bit alarming. I think it would be fair to say that something is very wrong. What was your first indication? When he showed up or when he spoke to us? Haku sighed, seeing his point, even if it was very sarcastic and uncouth. I'm going to see what he wants with Naruto-kun, Gaara announced, suspecting trouble. Keep an eye on Temari and Kankuro until I get back. Haku nodded. Hurry. Gaara disappeared in a whirlwind a moment later. Itachi followed Naruto as he raced over the rooftops. Kisame bulldozed a path for them with his Zanbato, making short work of the hordes of shadow clones buffering them. Looks like I jinxed it, Kisame figured, amused that Naruto had deceived them into a false sense of security. Now it was a matter of capturing and silencing the runt before more Junin arrived to stall them. Itachi formed a shadow clone of his own and sent it to retrieve the pesky Jinchuriki while a dozen blondes attempted to tackle him after shoving Kisame into a gutter. His cage bunshin exploded on the adjacent roof, knocking Naruto onto a balcony and destroyed the last of his clones. Naruto took note of the maneuver. He can make his shadow clones blow up. I am totally gonna learn how to do that. The blonde boy returned to the top of a building where Kisame had been waiting, and ducked the oncoming swing of his gargantuan sword. Suck on this. Rasengan. The shark-like ninja's eyes widened in shock as the spiraling sphere of chakra clipped him on his side and sent him flying into a brick wall on the opposite side of the rooftop. Itachi stood nearby on an air vent, watching interestedly as Naruto rounded on him. Your power is impressive for your age. I was not expecting it. You truly are all that remains of the fourth Hokage. Dirtbags like you have no place talking about people as great as him. Naruto howled indignantly, his fists clenching. I had nothing but respect for that man. Itachi told him. Though it was supposed to be a compliment, it made Naruto's bee boil. Naruto formed hand seals and created more cage bunshin, ready to put the Uchiha in his place. Jiraiya had a feeling he was getting closer to Naruto after seeing Sasuke run past him on the street for no explicable reason. He had not anticipated the Akatsuki to be hunting for Naruto so soon, but he was certain his young pupil had received enough training to hold his own against them at least for a little while. And if Sasuke's here, that means he must know what's happening right now, or that knows that his brother has arrived. At least, Jiraiya followed after the Uchiha survivor, keeping track of his movements as he weaved through the crowds on the street. Kisame had attacked Naruto and his clones head-on while he had been distracted by Itachi. The blade grazed his shoulder painfully as it hacked through the cage bunshin surrounding him, beginning to feed on his chakra. When he gets close, it's like I can't feel my chakra. Naruto ducked back away from the sword, wondering what jutsu he could counter it with. He rushed through hand seals before Kisame could get close again, swiping his thumb over his B shoulder. Kuchio's no jutsu. A frighteningly large battle toad appeared with a puff of smoke, crossing blades with Kisame as he growled in frustration. Naruto had proved to be a more capable shinobi than he had originally thought. The blonde boy turned his attention to Itachi again, more interested in fighting him. This is the guy who killed all those people. He's Sasuke's brother. His expression was one of righteous fury. I'll make him pay for what he did. It hadn't taken Sasuke long to catch up with the scuffling ninja on the rooftops. He had only had to follow the trail of rubble they left behind them. Naruto felt his jaw drop in horror as Sasuke appeared on the left side of the building, declaring vengeance on his older brother. This changed things, Naruto noted. He watched Sasuke form the Chidori, and pondered if perhaps he would actually be able to kill his brother as he intended to. He had a feeling he wouldn't. Sasuke, wait. He's too. Naruto's cry went unheard as the younger Uchiha charged across the roof towards Itachi, screaming one word that summed up all of the feelings he felt for his brother, S. Itachi sidestepped the attack with precision timing and grabbed his brother's wrist. His face was illuminated by the crackling light of the Chidori. The light putted out as Itachi broke his brother's arm with minimal effort, oblivious to his cries of pain. Naruto locked eyes with the Nukenon, seeing in him a challenge, or a compromise, or something that dared him to save Sasuke from a worse fate should he choose to do nothing. I can't believe this, it's like a hostage situation now. Naruto stood very still while he watched Sasuke weakly struggle to free himself from his brother's grip. It's me they want, Sasuke shouldn't have gotten involved. But, if I don't do something that bastard will kill him for sure. Bored of Naruto's hesitance to intervene, Itachi proceeded to ruthlessly beat his brother, breaking through his blocks and sending him crashing to the concrete of the roof, taunting the Jinchuriki to put an end to it. Just stop it, Naruto roared, unwilling to surrender, but knowing better than to attempt to rescue Sasuke. You'll kill him. He's your brother, why would you? Itachi carelessly tossed Sasuke off the side of the building after he had gone limp, and Naruto decided that risking himself was his only option. 3 shadow clones materialized and caught the younger Uchiha as he fell, pulling him back to the safety of the ledge. Itachi made a move to destroy the clones that had rescued Sasuke, and Naruto raced ahead, unaware that Kisame had at last dispatched the troublesome battle toad he had summoned. He was hot on Naruto's tail with his sword raised to S. Kisame was blindsided by a Rasengan that hurled into him from behind, knocking him into the cluster of air vents ahead of him with a painfully loud crash. I am sick of this attack. Back off, you miserable fish face. Jiraiya snarled, intent on finishing the missed Nukenon. His hair would turn pink before he let the Akatsuki lay a hand on his student. Naruto turned, grinning, glad to see his sensei had caught up. Itachi, meanwhile, had eliminated the last of the clones that had been defending Sasuke. The younger boy lay helplessly on the roof, his eyes dim and dispirited. It's just like last time, I wasn't able to do anything then and I can't now. I'm not strong enough. He felt a hand close tightly around his T, lifting him into the air. Itachi was disappointed in Sasuke's lack of ability. Sasuke, there is not enough hate inside of you to kill me. I thought you were serious about challenging me. His air supply was off and Sasuke made a vain effort to struggle until a blast of sand had barreled into Itachi, forcing him back to the edge of the building. Sasuke collapsed down to the roof again, his energy depleted. Gaara folded his arms and stood beside the crumpled mess of an Uchiha that was next to him. He glowered ahead at Itachi, uncertain of what was going on, but still sure that he was an enemy. Itachi swiped the sand from his cloak with only half a mind. You are an enigma. The red-haired boy decided to hear him out before crushing him. You can tell. For someone who hates Sasuke as desperately as you do, there really is no cause for you to save his life. Itachi's powers of observation were alarmingly accurate, but then again, Gaara's loathing for Sasuke was rather easy to spot. Gaara smirked, if anyone is going to kill him, it's me. Naruto noticed Gaara's arrival shortly after Jiraiya had rushed over to him, making sure he was in one piece. Kisame, terribly aggravated by being throttled too easily, returned to Itachi's side and glared venomously at Jiraiya. Itachi made note that they were outnumbered and decided it wasn't worth the trouble. Kisame were leaving. The 2 Nukenon leapt down into the alley below to make the getaway, and Jiraiya pursued them, only to find that they had vanished. They had left no trace that would indicate where they had fled to, and Jiraiya paced around in the alley by himself for a few moments, supremely pissed. Unbelievable. Can't get a goddamn break with these kids. His eye was twitching uncontrollably, first Naruto being cornered, then Sasuke pokes his nose into our business, and of course the sand kid just has to save the day. What if they realized he has the Ichibi? Is it worth him jeopardizing himself at a time like this? Although he knew it was unlikely that Itachi and Kisame had recognized Gaara to also be a Jinchuriki, it would only be a matter of time before they came looking for him as well. Jiraiya had finally calmed himself down after a short while, just in time to notice a ninja racing down the alleyway towards him. Dynamic entry. A kick in the face sure brought him back to his senses. It was only after his surprise attack did Guy realize he had ambushed the Toad Sage. He did sincerely apologize, but, naturally, Jiraiya didn't want to hear it. You're a bit late, Guy, the party's over. And why the hell did you kick me? A raucous on the roof reminded him that there were still serious matters that needing tending to. Guy followed after Jiraiya to the top of the building, still sheepishly apologizing for his mistake. Naruto had managed to pull Sasuke in an upright sitting position, but he was drifting in and out of consciousness. It appeared as if the psychological damage done to him had arrested his physical functions. Gaara, as usual, was far less worried over the matter and was more concerned over Naruto's welfare. Guy, take Sasuke back to Konoha to get his injuries treated, Jiraiya instructed, fishing through his GI for his pipe. Boys, I need to have a chat with you two right now. Guy promptly left with Sasuke slung over his shoulder, and Gaara and Naruto gave their attention to their mentor, wondering what exactly had happened. Neither of you are hurt, are you? The Toad Sage inquired while lighting his pipe. Those two could have easily KU, you know. They are S-class criminals. Kisame got my arm pretty bad, but it healed up a while ago. Naruto displayed the tear in his jacket. Webby had dried but his wound was completely mended. What the heck did they want with me, Ero-sensei? All I did was. It's not about what you did, Naruto, it's simply about you in general. He took a dragon, then nodded his head to the red-haired boy. And you too, Gaara, believe it or not. This time they only came looking for Naruto, but you won't be far behind on the list, I'm sure. What are you talking about? Gaara questioned, impatient with Jiraiya's chatter. Recently I've been keeping tabs on a dangerous collection of Nukenin who call themselves the Akatsuki, Jiraiya admitted, taking a seat on the side of the building. They seek to gain power from the Biju. You two each possess one of the 9. Because of that they've been plotting to capture you and seal away your respective demons for their own benefit. Naruto, a bit overwhelmed by the news, sat down beside his teacher to absorb the information. Gaara preferred to stand, but still felt a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. I didn't think they'd be looking for you this early, but it looks like I was wrong, the Toad Senin confessed. From now on I advise you to be cautious. Be wary of your surroundings because they have spies that can dig up information on just about anything. What about Haku? Do they know about him? Gaara asked quietly, wondering if it would be an issue. No, they don't know him and don't care to know him since he isn't a Jinchuriki like you. Jiraiya dismissed the idea, adding, don't get me wrong. He's still got his own problems. He won't be able to rest easy until Orochimaru is good and S. Hey, we'll be fine, Gaara-kun. You'll see. Naruto's confidence returned rather quickly. We always watch each other's backs, so what are we worrying for? They won't be back for a while if they know what's good for M. The Toad Sage chuckled. I couldn't have said it better myself, Naruto. Now, I say it's about time we get back to our search. Naruto stood up and clapped Gaara on the back. Hey, he lowered his voice. Thanks for saving Sasuke back there. I'm sure that'll give you one up on him, eh? Gaara smirked broadly. I'm going back home now. Don't get yourself K. Naruto watched the red-haired boy descend down to the street below and head south before turning back to Jiraiya, who was still smoking in order to settle his nerves. It did cross his mind if Sasuke ever would be able to be at peace with his brother, at least by way of K him. In his opinion it seemed a very lofty goal, but then again, one not as far-fetched as his dream of being Hokage. Everyone's got their own agenda, I guess. Haku had tried to explain to Sakura why Gaara had not come with him, and had hesitantly admitted that he had gone to check up on Sasuke after he had been acting strangely. She didn't seem too bothered but had asked Kiba to retrieve them if he could. After Akamaru had picked up their scent he had left, assuring Sakura he'd make sure they weren't tearing each other's tea out. That had left her a bit uneasy. I'm going to need replacement blades for Karasu, Kankuro mentioned as they passed by Tenten's weapons forge. You think we can stop here for a bit so I can make repairs? Temari recalled how his puppet had gotten quite mangled after fighting a cloud shinobi who was surprisingly adept with a sword. She shrugged to her brother, seeing they had little else to do. Sakura followed Kankuro inside the shop, wanting to say hello to Tenten and get some spare kunai if she could. Temari waited outside the forge with Haku, observing the magnificent weapons on display in the window, not going in. Huh. I don't think I should. She raised an eyebrow at him. Why's that? Haku smiled to himself. Tenten has a lot on her mind, I'm sure. I tend to make her nervous when I'm around and I don't want to bother her. You like her. Temari really can't differentiate between personal and casual questions. He decided to humor her. I did once. Only as a friend now, I suppose. Temari looked as if she was interested in the subject and he couldn't tell why. She leaned on the wood panel of the door, folding her arms in the same fashion Gaara would. What discouraged you then? She dumped you. It was a bit of a disaster, really, Haku chuckled, embarrassed to admit it. I should have known better. Her teammates are very protective over her and I really wasn't being rational when I pursued her either. A wise decision on your part, Temari agreed, recalling Team 13, you wouldn't want to cross that Neji fellow if you don't want a beating. Haku frowned, remembering Neji's jealousy. I learned that the hard way. Temari laughed good-naturedly and he was glad that she had finally warmed up to him. Even if it had cost him an embarrassing story and nearly having himself he was truly grateful that he had the chance to get to know her. It was also fascinating just how much she and Kankuro were comparable to Gaara in physical appearance and personality traits, although Temari is far more capricious than either of her brothers. He also found himself acting more and more puppy-headed, as Naruto had called it. The phrase was synonymous with overly complacent, he guessed. This fawning behavior had started after he had fought her in the exam, but he couldn't really justify himself. She's dauntless, feisty, rude, very beautiful and, Haku paused and blinked at his reflection in the glass of the display window. I really like her. The last time he had liked someone it had not worked out. Maybe now he was better prepared. It was a sweet revelation with bad timing. Hello, Earth to pretty boy. She had been trying out new nicknames for him, some more polite than others. Haku snapped himself out of his contemplative state and gave her his attention, hoping she couldn't read his thoughts like an open book. Temari gave him a puzzled look. You're not going to pass out or anything, are you? You had that look again. No, I'm alright. I was just thinking. He searched for an easy topic, and picked one he was genuinely curious about. What was life like for you when you were younger, when Gaara-kun still lived with you? She was silent for a long moment and looked away from him. Well, you can't really describe living like that. I'd call it terrifying, maybe, but that really doesn't do it justice, Temari answered in a low voice, recalling how it was, everything was based on fear. My father had made so many rules and restrictions about Gaara that it made him seem less like our brother and more like a ticking time bomb. Were you afraid of him? Haku asked, his eyes were gentle and understanding. A little. I was afraid of what he would do but I wasn't afraid of him, Temari explained. I wanted him to get better. I remember being sad because our family stopped being a family and turned into a militia shortly after my mother's. Haku listened quietly, beginning to see how it was. All Kankuro and I could do was study and train to be shinobi because our father had devoted so much time to Gaara and he barely ever let us go near him. It was too dangerous, and only because he made him that way. She sneered, hating her father. The only person he allowed near Gaara was my uncle and even then, he was still bent on killing him when he thought that his powers had become too much to control. He must have been very lonely. The dark-haired boy commented, and she sighed, trying to relax. It will never be that way again. He's alive and he's safe here, Temari said softly. We won't let him be unhappy like he was back in Suna. This place has changed him. She turned to Haku, regarding him for a moment. You changed him. He didn't want to take all the credit for it, but he admitted that he was a very positive influence. Haku smiled at her. Well, I do think you've answered my question to the best of your ability. He looked into the shop through the window to see Tenten taking measurements of Kankuro's puppet and Sakura was helping her with the measuring tape. How about we get some tea? Tea. Temari blinked at him. Fine. But I only like ginseng with honey and I seriously doubt it'll be as good as it is back home. Haku walked beside her contentedly as they turned the corner to head for the tea house, and he dearly hoped things would go more smoothly this time than they had the last time he had been there. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.